Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are so thrilled to be presenting today's conversation in conjunction with New York Women in Film and Television and Women in Film. So thank you to them for partnering with us on this fabulous event. And we're so excited to be discussing the women behind Borat with Monica Levinson, who's producer on the movie, and we have writers Jena Friedman, Rivinoja and Nina Pedrad. And I wanted to start by just asking about the initial framework and concept of the script, because obviously, you know, Borat is very improvisational, but at the same time, there's a lot of script work that goes into it, both in pre-production, while you're continuing to film, there's table reads and all of those elements. So with the initial conceptualization of the idea, what does that first draft of a script framework look like for all of you?
Well, I guess I'll jump in and just say that, it's a very unorthodox style of writing, and it's more like a TV writer's room at certain points. Obviously, it goes to an outline, but there was a germ of an idea that Sasha had with his core team that he did the first movie with in terms of writers, and then he started to work that idea out, brought Nina in to the writer's room at that point, and really worked through really wanted to make the story about female centric, really talk about the daughter's journey. And that's where I can have Nina jump in there and talk about what that process was like.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was like, we know that we want it to be about him and his daughter. That feels timely with where the character is now. And the problem solving of it was like, what's their dynamic and how does it change and who grows and how? Does she hate him? Does she love him? How does he feel about her, given what we know? So we kind of like went down a few roads and it was like, no, do not go there. That's not gonna, either that's straight up offensive or it's like not gonna yield, not gonna be the engine that we need for a whole movie. So yeah, there were some things that I'm happy we didn't explore.
But I think that, we made it, I think what you really were talking through was this fairy tale idea. And I think, you can talk a little bit about, I think, that piece of it and where, that this became a fairy tale.
Yeah, it's like, it felt like, Sasha talked a lot about like, how do you do like a two-hander clown thing, like how are they both funny, how do they feed each other, that kind of thing. And that was sort of like the comedy umbrella of it maybe, but the fairy tale is we landed on, and I'm so happy that we did, and I think everybody else who came on did such a great job executing it. Like she has always loved her dad, and the journey is Borat's to learn to love her and accept her and accept a part of himself. And that's so much heavier than like what you think of a Borat movie. And at times I was like, oh God, is this going to be, bowling balls on a hang glider? But it ended up working out, I think really well. And yeah, it's like the fairy tale, I guess, to Monica's, point is that she starts off loving him. She starts off completely enamored with her father, doesn't care how he feels about her. She knows in his heart, that he's right about everything. And then at some point that changes. And it was kind of cool because, yeah, Monica, you say fairy tale, but a part of me is like, it's also just every girl with her dad a little bit. Like it's every girl who like loves her dad and then becomes a teenager and is like, oh my God, everything you ever taught me was wrong. It's just truncated into one trip to America over the course of, a little amount of time. But I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I want to let other people talk.
Well, off the back of that, Nina, Erica, and Jena, maybe this is a question for the three of you. I know that actually part of what you all looked at were those classical cinema moments where it really is about a father and a daughter and parental relationships. And so I was really interested in how much more classic storytelling really influenced the way that you crafted out some of the story and some of the scenes between their two characters.
Well, it was also, at the heart of it, I think it was a traditional love story and not in the incestual way, but it was really just, two characters who didn't really need to be together suddenly find out they really, really need to be together and fall in love with each other in a father-daughter way. And it was just sort of really making sure that that was thematically in every scene, that his, that every scene grew with him sort of starting to question, well, are the rules how they should be? Is it true that daughters are awful, and so it was really just sort of pacing that out and really making it a satisfying ending. And I think we succeeded. I mean, it was really, I don't know, there's a sweetness to it that I'm really proud of. And then I think that the movie, even though the first movie was perfect, I think the second movie is more perfect, and just that it feels like there's just a lot more emotion in it. It just feels like it grew. And I like that the storytelling grew because of that, because of the addition of a lady, which who knew that ladies can help things.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, obviously in building out scenes for the character of Borat, that's a character that, not just the creative team know, but the audiences are familiar with and are going to have certain ideas of how he responds and how he behaves in situations. But obviously with bringing Maria's character, Tuta, into this, what was the difference in really thinking about and shaping this character when you didn't yet have the actor in place to know what their skills were going to be and what they were going to bring to it when you were working on the initial drafts of the script?
I think we just all assumed it would happen and we would find somebody that would bring it. Nina was certainly in the room during that early stage, but we just all assumed that we would find somebody amazing. And it was a long search. We really had to search for somebody who felt authentic and that could bring what exactly we were expecting to have brought to the table, there. And Maria was, probably a one-of-a-kind find for us.
Yeah, it was really fun too. It was like, pitching around, being like, well, what would be funny for him? And then at some point it was like, let's get it on its feet. And we brought different people in to try different versions of, what if she, she's more talkative in the beginning or not? Or what if she's like, to kind of dialing in, how intelligent do we want her to be? What's her starting point? What's the journey from there? It was super fun.
Primitive. Yeah.
Yeah. How primitive.
Yeah, exactly.
And how much of an animal she was too. I mean, there are some early versions where she was just an uncaged badger, basically. And it was that sort of, once we started giving her more dimensions, I think it was really, that's when it all sort of fell into place.
And,
yeah.
I was just going to say, because of the writing process, we're doing this writer's room. Literally, Erica and Jena were there through the end of post. I mean, they're in there still having these conversations about the character and the arc and how we're weaving this in. And every day as we're going on to set, literally, Sasha is thinking up or looking at new material and figuring out exactly where it's going to go. But it's based on the writers working 24/7 to get it done. Sorry.
And even in Maria's initial, I think I saw her first audition tape. There was an opportunity to improvise with the sides, and she had a little bit of a pushback and a little bit of an attitude, and it felt authentic, and it felt like this movie could have gone so many different directions, as Nina said, but to have a girl with a strong point of view that you trusted, knew what the comedy was and was in control of the comedy, it gave people permission to laugh with her and have confidence in her performance. And I think that was critical with this type of a character, because it could have, particularly the scene with Giuliani, that is such a scary scene for any actor or any person. And she handled it with so much confidence and competence that it was, I think, only to Maria's credit, and also obviously the crew and Sasha and everyone who supported her, that scene was able to be executed in a way that didn't feel like what it could have gone so far south. And I think that just having someone as adept and strong as Maria was like how we were able to execute it.
Yeah, and I feel like that scene is such a testament to how safety was paramount to everybody involved in that project. There's footage that you could have gotten in that moment if the cameras had kept rolling and if he hadn't come in, that would have been, you know, even more extreme than what we saw, but safety was the first priority over the content in that moment. And so to that point, I'm really actually interested in what some of the unique safety parameters were for this film, you know, and with you, Monica, as well, even in comparison to working on the first movie, what was really distinctive and unique to this one. And as you were writing and scripting out a lot of these scenes and story moments, what were some of the safety, you know, things that you were having to think about even at the script writing process and creating the initial story?
Well, I'll just say that, you know, with the first movie, you have Sasha and we had Ken Davidian, and, you know, but we didn't really put Ken into any extreme circumstances. I mean, the naked fight running through was, you know, there were some trying moments, and we certainly had security that were helping and coming in at the same time. But you think about it, because Sasha, you know, is a big boy, and we're going to talk through what he's going to go in, and he's a producer and part of this process and a writer and part of creating all of this. But, you know, we're bringing Maria in and we're putting her into we can't put her in the same place. Like, she has to be able to know what she's going in for and have a voice in doing that. So the first thing she said to me was, "I'm all in. I don't care. Whatever it is, I'm in." But, you know, ultimately it's I know that she's brave and I know she wanted to do everything, but, you know, it was our responsibility to make sure that, you know, we didn't put her in any position that we wouldn't want to be put in ourselves. So we just kept her safe.
I will also say that as much as it seems like the whole movie is improvised, and it is written to within an inch of its life. And I mean, all credit to Maria and Sasha, but they go in there with a lot of lines. We practice beforehand. We have someone act like a normal person and have normal responses. And so they have tons of lines. They are prepared for pretty much any situation. I mean, so it's really, you know, as writers, it's not just putting together a tiny little script of, oh, get these 4 lines. It's, well, if this happens, then you can say that. Like, it's really, it's a really intensive process just getting ready for one scene, because when someone doesn't know what they're going to say, it's pretty crazy. So I feel like, you know, security was prepped, the lines were prepped, like there was so much to keep everybody safe, but also let things get a little crazy too. You know, it was always fun. Like the debutante ball was my favorite scene. It's just so iconic, and it's just, things really went off the rails after that dance. And I remember being parked outside of that mansion and just reading the WhatsApp texts of, okay, get your equipment and get out of here. This is, you know, do not talk to anyone, just quick, you know, heads down. And it was that sort of thing of like, just how exciting to be a part of that, you know, and we knew it was going to go off the rails. That's why it was done at the very end of it. It's not like we thought everyone was going to come together and have a lovely debutante ball afterwards, but it was just all about being safe and prepared from every department, but also just letting the risks happen, not in an unsafe one.
And a lot of the credit,
a little crazy, but sorry.
A lot of the credit also goes to the field team, because they're so talented, and there's so much experience with live action stunt comedy with everybody Sasha brings in. A lot of people worked on Who's America and the original Borat and other live action pranky type shows. And so there's just so much, people are so prepared. They're at the top of their games. They diffuse any tension. They look out for any tension. I think there was a story that was posted around about a woman accidentally was in both Borats. There was someone who was in the garage sale scene in Borat 1, and then she accidentally signed up for some kind of Craigslist post, and then she said something to the effect of like, well, last time I went to one of these, it was for Borat. And the field team, to their credit, made sure that she wasn't in on it the second time. And so they're so good and they make it safe. And I think that's a really big part of how something like this could be executed. Because what they pulled off, like particularly with the Deb scene, was remarkable.
And also both Sasha and Maria have to feel safe in an environment that everybody is working as a well-oiled machine, even with the allowances of some craziness and messiness to come in. But they have to be prepared. They have to know that everybody is working in that same goal so that they can act and freely be who they need to be, and not be thinking. I mean, Sasha as a producer can't be thinking about all the other things that could go wrong in that scene. So he has to trust everybody that he's in a safe environment, and he knows when, like, Erica says, it could go off the rails, but he's prepared for that. But he has to go in knowing they both do have to be in a safe environment.
Also, Israeli bodyguards are the best. Anytime the Israeli security team was around, I've never felt safer in my entire life. So kudos to Israel. They know what they're doing with safety.
I also love that there was the mention before about how much every single scene is written and rewritten with every possible outcome. And so I wanted to ask about that in terms of how that makes it such a unique experience and process and journey when it comes to writing the script, because you don't have to come up with an idea and put it away because another idea is stronger. You can still actually play out all of the different potential scenarios of where every individual moment could go. And also within rewriting the scene so many different ways, you also know that maybe only 30 or 40% of what you write is going to end up in the final moment. So does it also teach you to be really specific with language, but not precious about it during that process as well?
Yeah, I think for me, it was my TV experience was really good because in TV, even more so than features, there's a lot of thinking on your feet and being, coming up with things on the fly and just being able to pitch and pivot when things change. And I feel like that was really, really useful on this movie. And especially when we'd come up, like someone was supposed to show up, someone that they had hired, and then they didn't show up. And so a different person, and you'd prep for something. So it was all just sort of done in this kind of chaos, very fun chaos. But it was definitely, it was very fun to pitch jokes on the day, but also to step back and have to make sure, okay, did we get out of this scene what we needed in the big macro picture of the movie, and making sure that a hilarious little scene didn't become about something that wasn't relevant to that. So it was also, as a writer, you're focusing on these tiny little moments, but also, oh, was this part of Borat and Tutar's big journey? And it's hard. Being a writer is hard, you guys.
Well, to that point, was there a real difference in terms of the relationship between the writer's room and the editing team as well? Because obviously you were continuing to write scenes as they were editing and filming in real time, and you had that opportunity to sometimes go and look at the cut that they'd made, see what they were including, to then know what another scene you're filming really needed to, where it needed to pick up, and certain things that it needed to include, or, well, we've set up this joke, so it needs to continue within the movie and we need to find a place to put this. So how did that differ from other projects that you've all worked on before?
I think the one difference, like it was really, and I'm going back to that period scene because it's a kind of funny example of, there was this talk of how far to push it, and all the women on the project, I don't want to speak for everybody, but chime in, Monica, Erica, we really wanted them to go as far as they could with all the period stuff, because you never see that in terms of like live action studio comedies. I've seen all sorts of gross out humor. I haven't really seen period stuff. And B, like, it's one of those things that are like in that perfect sweet spot of edgy, but you can push as far as you want because it's really just a natural thing that has been stigmatized and it shouldn't be. And so I think like during the editing process, a lot of the women were like, more period. Sorry. Okay, there's like this she did the period dance, but there's just more to it that I think is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I hope that if there's like an extended cut, everyone else can see it. But I think that there was, and to the point, like, you know, there's only so much you can put in a movie that's a certain amount of time. But that was the only thing I noticed in terms of like a disconnect of like the women being like, push it further. And the guys are like, I don't know, it's too much. But yeah, jump in, anyone.
No,
Yeah.
that absolutely. We kept saying how much is too much, and there were, to be fair, there were some women that were definitely saying it's too much, you know. And I think it is about the stigmatization and that, you know, the embarrassment, which shouldn't be embarrassing. But my point was that, you know, some people said they felt bad for the debutantes. My whole point was, if I was in that room, I hope I would have been that person that walked over to her as soon as I saw the first sight of blood and said, honey, let me take you to the bathroom and let me help you, you know? And instead, they all shunned her. And I thought, well, I don't feel bad for anybody, you know.
Yeah.
You know, you help out your fellow, you know, your fellow gal. You go and you help somebody. And so I actually, you know, we didn't have a lot of people to screen this movie. We did screen in New Zealand, but in the earlier stages, we started screening for friends and family, like home in their living rooms, and having them record. And my 16-year-old niece was like, she called me and she goes, this is my favorite scene in the movie. This is the best thing I've ever seen. And I said, well, they're thinking of like trimming it. She goes, no. And she had seen the longer scene, Jena. And she was like, don't trim it. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's the most amazing. And so, yeah, but we did come up with this delicate balance, because audiences were definitely like, it was the most, you know, it was a scene where most people have very strong opinions one way or the other.
And I'm on like the far end of the spectrum where I'm like, everybody should be bleeding in their debutante ball dress. That was also just something really funny. On Halloween, Maria, people were tagging her on Instagram with their Halloween costumes, and it was like debutante ball dresses with period blood all over them. All these young girls were wearing like period blood deb dresses for Halloween, and it was so heartwarming, because you're just like, finally, I think this thing is being destigmatized. And I know it sounds like gross, but it's I don't know, it's like so exciting and rewarding to kind of see all that happen. And I think this is the first interview I've ever been part of where I've mentioned it and haven't immediately been cut off by the guy interviewing us. So thank you, Mara.
Mara,
You're welcome. Glad I could provide that service. I'll just suddenly be like, my camera's not working. No, I'm kidding. And
They're
Nina,
like,
actually,
we're
you know,
out of time.
Nina, one of the big pivots that I wanted to ask you about in particular was the shift of COVID. You know, you were talking at the beginning about, you know, obviously this is very much about Borat's journey of learning and shifting and changing and understanding feminism and his relationship with his daughter as the emotional heart. But you guys started filming this infamously before COVID, and then found a way to get production up and running very quickly in a really, really safe way, with a lot of medical professionals consulting on the project. But in going back to that original story arc that you had created with Sasha and the rest of the team at the beginning, what did it then look like to dive back into those conversations and have to think not only about how you needed to reshape certain things that you had planned out from the very beginning, but also how to make sure that it really fit within the tone of the movie overall and didn't feel like a sudden pivot and distraction?
You know, to be completely honest, that was the guys. That wasn't my part of it. Was sort of helping. I just was on earlier. I was helping them figure out the initial structure of the father-daughter story. And it was like, all right, how do we build this train? But then later, I thought everybody else did such a great job. I think I told Ant and Dan that it was like, yeah, it was just incredible to see the train that we built on like the choo-choo tracks of the pandemic, you know, because it was like, it was always going to be a father-daughter story, you know, that was before they brought me on, it was like that. And the months that I was there, it was like that. But I'm really curious to hear Jena and Erica and Monica take that, because I thought everybody who was there for that part of it did such a great job.
It was a big debate, actually, because part of us, we didn't know if it was actually going to become a thing, if the pandemic was really going to become a pandemic. So there was a lot of debate about, oh, well, do we have to sort of shove this in there? And then as it became very clear that, oh, this is our lives now, we then really had to pivot. And that's when we came up with the lockdown house and him being locked up with those two amazing guys. And just sort of really, it did wind up, we worked really hard to integrate it into the story and make it seem like a part of everything. And it was not easy. There was a bunch of footage that we got rid of, and there was a bunch of new stuff that we had to come up with. And we had suddenly we're shooting in Washington, and it was just this sort of, the whole movie was in flux at any point. So the pandemic was just one more part of like, okay, I guess we have to deal with the pandemic, so we're going to move locations. So it was just, it was part of this super fun thing about working on this, was that you just sort of never knew what was going to come up next and what you were going to have to write and who you were going to write it for. And it was really fun and terrifying. But I also felt super safe. My husband's an anesthesiologist, and I've been tested for COVID more than he has working in a hospital because of how safe the production was. So I think that's good, or it's a terrible indictment of our healthcare system. So maybe both.
And because of the mention just now of the scene where Borat's quarantining with the two guys and living with them for several days, one of the things I think that's so beautiful about that is, there's moments where the darker side of things are uncovered within the film and with it through this character, or there's women not telling someone that they've got their period on their white dress. But also there's moments where you kind of anticipate that that's where it's going to go, but actually we see the heart in people. They really were concerned about his relationship with his daughter and helping to fix it for him, and took him into their home to begin with, and that comes up in a lot of moments throughout this film in particular. And is that something that you're all consciously thinking of in really proactively trying to make a central part of the film, or did you find that it really just depends on the moments once you're filming with subjects, what comes out of them?
It's definitely conscious to try to find multidimensional people. And again, that's very much part of the casting process and very much the credit of the field team. To show, I think a lot of like mainstream media that we see is very binary, but to show a conspiracy theorist who's also kind of feminist, or like, to show characters that are multidimensional. I think as much as this film is like an indictment of Trumpism, it still showed people that support him, and I think a very humanizing light, and that we all set out to do that.
And Monica, I wanted to ask you to that point a little bit about the way in which some of the subjects are cast and what you're all looking for, and what that process and journey looks like. What are the conversations that are happening when you're looking at a babysitter for Tuta, or even just we're looking for a mail services place where he can come in and send faxes, and what that's going to look like? How are you kind of having conversations, because you're also having to build such an element of trust with people without giving them any actual information at the same time?
Right. Well, as Jena said, that really is the field department. They're amazing, and they are looking for somebody who's going to have patience, to sit there and be there for hours and hours on end while there's a long fax conversation happening, that could be by text, but now we're waiting, 20 minutes for the next fax to come in, it's a very long process. So you're looking for somebody who's kind and has patience, and will sit there and be with this, crazy foreign man. And with the babysitter, you're looking for somebody who, going back to the fairy tale, you're looking for that fairy godmother, somebody who's going to give great advice to, or just be somebody who's not going to, listen, we were thrilled with the way she acted. And usually, usually when we did these movies before, when I did Borat and Bruno, we would try to have 3 people that would fit each scenario, and bring them in and do it 3 different times, so you get 3 takes. With Janice, she was the first person, and she, was a home run. She said all this. She wouldn't take, anything that he was saying. She just would go back at him, which was nice to have somebody who wouldn't take Borat shit, if you will. Sorry for my language, women. But, she just wouldn't take it. She would, question him and go back and then speak her mind to tutor and take care of her. So it was nice to find somebody. They really did work, with the church. They went to find people that were patient, strong women. So, you just kind of go about, they are very good at that. And Jena actually worked very closely with the field team. And, they would come in, they would come into the writer's room all the time also, and talk about who they have, ideas they have. And so all the writers were part of this casting process, if you will. So Jena also, was a big part of the Pregnancy Crisis Center, because that was something that she really felt strongly about. And Jena, I'll throw that to you. You can talk for yourself, speak for yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been on the Pregnancy Crisis Center beat since I used to work at The Daily Show. And in 2018, I think that there was a Supreme Court ruling in their favor. These places are totally allowed to exist. They set up shop next to actual women's health clinics. They hire people who don't have licenses to wear lab coats and lie to vulnerable pregnant people. And so when I pitched the idea, I was so excited at how receptive Sasha and the whole team was to it. And there was kind of like, when we do these scenes, we're always like, what are they going to say? And how far can we push it? What can we get away with? And the sad part was, I was like, this is what the guy's going to say. He's going to be totally fine with this. And then he was. And in terms of like the incest, the joke, or so awful. But, and to the point of just like, in terms of like production, we always talk about like how to do it ethically. And it's so careful, because you're making a comedy, but you don't want to really throw people under the bus or put words in their mouth or do anything in a way that's dodgy. And I think that the production handled it really well. And, with the Pregnancy Crisis Center in general, those are places that like make money tricking people into going into their facilities. So I didn't feel that bad about that beat. But yeah, the movie in general, just the power of Borat to be such a silly, funny comedian, it gives us license. The fact that we can sneak in real things like the Pregnancy Crisis Center in such a big way is like honestly a dream for any comedian. Yeah.
And then lastly, for all of you, I wanted to ask about what's your personal accomplishment within the making of this movie that you're proudest of? Maybe starting with you, Erica.
I would say I'm most proud that it is a sweet, emotional feminist movie at the heart of it. And even though it's Borat that has the big character journey, I think that Tutar is the hero, Janice is the hero. It's just all about these women in it that actually give him this emotional arc. So yeah, that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah. What about you, Nina?
I'm proud that we helped make Borat a feminist, I think. I think I'm really proud that Tutar's number 3 and he's number 4, best journalist, that she's even better than him. And I think I'm proud, and even though I wasn't really involved in this part of it, I'm proud that we're not making fun of Middle Eastern people this time, that it's making fun of certain parts of America much more than it is the otherness of another culture.
Mm-hmm. And Jena?
Everything that Nina and Erica said. Also just that we were able to make something so relevant in such a time where it was so hard to make anything, and make something that people connected to, hopefully on all ends of the political spectrum. I got an email from an uncle of mine who I disagree with politically, congratulating us on the Golden Globe. He clearly watched the movie and it was cool. It's like, oh, comedy does bring people together. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the Crisis Pregnancy Center scene and the period stuff and all of it. And also the fact that that Jim and Jerry got, I don't know if they got like a nod for writing that song, but I thought the two guys in the lockdown house, I'm proud of them. Proud of Rudy Giuliani, really came through in a clutch. I'm proud of him. That was all him. He doesn't get enough credit for completely owning his own space in that scene. Real scene stealer.
Really just being himself.
Yeah.
And then what about you, Monica?
Yeah, and I'll just echo everything that they said. Just very proud of the movie, proud that it exists, that we were able to actually get it made. But one of the biggest things that I'm proud of is that, this is a massive difference from 11 years ago or 12 years ago when we did Bruno. So it was a 5-year process between Borat and Bruno. I was the only woman in sort of the producers, writers. I wasn't a writer, but I was the only woman. And we had field team writers and we had women in the ranks. But this is such a difference, having all of us sitting here and really shaping that story and shaping what the movie is. And I think the movie is stronger for it. And I was very, Sasha has always been super respectful of women, but it was incredible to see how he really would just kind of shush everybody and say, I want to hear from the women, because sometimes the men's voices could be overpowering on our Zooms or in post and talking through things. And he'd say, shh. Like, I need to hear from the women right now. So, I just think that was a big change. It's nice to see what women bring to the table in the writing and what we achieve. So I'm very, very proud of that. And that was, although it was my hope and dream, Sasha was ultimately responsible for making sure that these 3 women were there, and it would be an incessant calling. I've been trying to get Erica to join our writing team since 2007, I think. So for that, I think we tried on Bruno, maybe the first Borat, but he just kept trying, and it's nice to see everybody.
Well, the movie's such a phenomenal accomplishment in so many ways, and quite literally wouldn't have been the movie that it is without all of you. So congratulations on that, and thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.